Hello, students, and welcome to another in a series of video lectures for your social work intervention working with groups class. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about ending the group's work. And so, as all things are started and have a middle point, beginning, there's also an ending. And so, it's very important to understand the dynamics that are involved with ending the groups that you will actually be facilitating in your community settings. So let's jump into our discussion for today. So the first thing to keep in mind, and as you'll see in your readings, are some of the factors that influence group endings. And so things that you need to be aware of in your work with the groups that you'll be facilitating are keeping in mind some important things about whether groups are, for example, task or treatment, taking into account the attraction of the groups for the members, the folks apart. We talked about attraction and talked also about, or talking about, open and closed memberships. Just remember that endings vary and depend on whether the group is open or closed. In closed groups, there are these unplanned terminations that all members end up um, ending at the same time. And in open groups are a little bit more different because you have people that are coming into the group and leaving the group all pretty much simultaneously. So keeping in mind whether your group is open or closed in terms of how you will then plan to move towards closing that particular group. Um, a lot of times you will end up having to deal with common feelings that arise as members of the group draw closer to that actual final time that they're meeting, as well as those reactions around just terminating. Also, in these groups, members that are attractive, remember groups work because of the attraction that members have for the process and the folks that are there. An ending may not be viewed necessarily as a positive event. And then for some folks in that group, recognizing too that it'll be a very positive thing because it was something that they had to endure to get through. So keeping in mind that the endings depend on a variety of different things. And the group, if it's a treatment group um, versus a task group, recognize that in the course of treatment, folks have actually disclosed fairly intimate details about their personal lives. They let their defenses down, and all of a sudden that just kind of comes to an abrupt halt. So planning for that as opposed to a task group is a little bit different. In that task groups are designated to work together on a specific topic for a specific period of time, um, and it's a little bit different type of sharing that occurs there that may be less intimate. So again, keeping in mind when you're ending the process that when you're doing the treatment groups that the therapy and the support groups and determination may be accompanied by emotional reactions. People may have some feelings about folks that they've gotten in touch with or connected with over the several last few weeks. Um, Also, educational and socialization groups terminate rarely uh, and results in expression of strong emotions. So again, sometimes it depends on just the nature of the group. Also, keeping in mind when we think about task groups, that again, as I had stated a little bit earlier, that there's a lot of self-disclosure, there's a lot of intimacy, there's a lot of people sharing various parts of themselves that they normally wouldn't share, and because the focus of those particular groups are around the therapeutic growth and education of folks, folks may respond to it differently as opposed to a task group where, again, there's very little self-disclosure. You're looking at coming up with a final product. And then the reality is that if you're in a work setting and you're on a task group, you might in fact work with that group of folks again on a future task. So the termination pieces would look a little bit different in terms of that. We always have planned and unplanned termination. So, either members will terminate for any number of reasons, as well as sometimes you, as the facilitator or the worker in the group, will need to terminate. And so what we can expect, and as you move into your own community groups, recognize that unplanned termination of members and groups is a fairly common thing that does happen. It's not a reflection on you per se in terms of your ability to facilitate, but it might be around what the individual client needs are, and the group may or may not be meeting that need. And so, on an average, about 30% or close to a third of the folks that may start at your group will probably not end in that same particular vein. Also recognize that in treatment groups in which they're, which attendance is voluntary, a reduction usually in membership usually occurs within the first or second group meeting. People are feeling things out, and it's either working for them or they're not. And then after those, usually those couple of groups, then you'll have a core group of folks that tend to stay with you until the end. But again, keeping in mind that all is subject to change. Some of the reasons that these terminations actually happen are numerous. A fear of the emotional pieces that are involved in some of those treatment groups, problems in developing intimate relationships, schedule conflicts, being kind of the group deviant. In other words, if you're in a group of folks and let's say you happen to be wealthy and everyone else is middle income, it may not be necessarily a good fit for you because that could become a barrier to actually learning the things that you need to learn. Um, Inadequate orientation to therapy, complications in group cohesion and development. All those are reasons why people may actually, or members of your group may actually terminate early. So keeping those things in mind. And on occasion, workers or group facilitators will have to terminate too. Typically, you'll see this, and you'll have somewhat of an experience when you go into your internships, and then in 16 weeks have to end those internships. So even though it's not necessarily a group piece, it's the same kind of a dynamic. And so um, students leaving field placements is a perfect example. If you're running groups in that field placement, then that planned termination will happen in that 16-week frame. And then to avoid disruption, to make sure that things work smoothly for your client, make sure that the unfinished business is complete. Let people know as early as you can if you have to terminate your particular work with that particular group. And then if at all possible, for the new person coming in to be a part of introducing that person so you guys can pick up where they left off as well. So those are things to keep in mind around those termination pieces. Um, and then when you're looking at ending those particular group meetings, you've got to keep a number of different things in mind. You need to focus on the closing of the group's work. How well have they done in terms of getting to what the goals and purposes were initially laid out. Arranging another meeting, preparing a summary report of the group work, and planning for future group work. Um, Keep members in those particular last groups focused on the topic. Limit the time that each member has, like you do in your normal groups, to discuss the issues, summarize what's been said, and obtain closure on each of the issues as it's being discussed. So focusing in on those sessions, looking back at what transpired over the course of the groups, analyzing the significance of what transpired, and examining what members can take away are all very important parts of the ending group. So as you're winding down your group sessions, making sure that you're also wanting to remind people about the good work that they've done, what they've learned, and how they can actually apply that in real world settings. Finally, also talking about ending the group as a whole. And so when you're looking at that, it's about what have you learned or learnings of the members. What have you learned about the group process? What have your members actually learned? How are you going to maintain those generalized change efforts for the things that they've actually utilized and learned over the course of your group work? How do you instill that now that they don't have the safety and security of the group to continue to reinforce that? Looking at reducing the group attraction again, because remember, folks were attracted and stayed in the group because they were attracted to the work that the group was doing as well as the members that were part of that group. And so to successfully disembark means we have to pay attention to how you reduce the attraction. Dealing with feelings, that's going to be a given as things come up. Planning for the future, referrals, and then evaluating the work of the group. And so when you're thinking about things like maintaining those generalized changes that your group members have actually made, You'll need to help them work on those relevant situations, help them develop confidence in their abilities, remind them that they're able to do that. Use those naturally occurring consequences. So if it's a chemical dependency group, and we know that people are kind of coming to an end, and it's about reminding them sometimes about what those consequences of being engaged back in that behavior can actually be for them. So those are just some ideas in terms of maintaining and generalizing the group change effort. Also, extending treatment through follow-up sessions if need be. For some folks, recognize that they're going to go into environments that are going to be less supportive for them as they matriculate back into mainstream society, and so to prepare them for that. And then helping these members solve problems independently by providing a framework and organizing data for them and helping them learn how to record things for themselves that they can use in a whole lot of different situations. So again, it's all of those things that were going to be important in terms of the work that you do with your clients. Also, there may be a need for follow-up sessions, especially when you're talking about treatment groups. An example could be a 12-week outpatient psychotherapy group, and then you might want to do some follow-up groups individually or follow-up sessions with that person to make sure that they're on track in terms of utilizing the things that have been taught to them. And then follow-up sessions are used to reinforce members' commitment to maintaining their change. So those are all things that you can take part of and be proud of in terms of the work. Bouncing back to that group attraction piece for just a moment, in terms of making sure that you're paying attention to reducing that, and that members often, when possible, should be involved in the planning of the termination of that group. That we need to focus on those future activities for those participants. Encourage participation in outside activities other than your group. Encourage members to express their feelings about group and each other. Demonstrate and encourage reflection about the skills that members have learned in group. So all of these things are going to help in terms of reducing some of those attraction pieces so that folks can actually then move forward and do some of the things they need to do. As well as then finally really having some conversation about the feelings about the ending. There'll be positive, there'll be negative, there'll be things that are there, but it's about really making sure that those things get fully vetted in that particular process. So again, letting people know that they have confidence or helping them build confidence in the skills that they have, feeling, or should I say, the sense of satisfaction and pride that they've completed the group, feeling independent and greater control of their lives, feeling empowered and potency as members to realize that they're capable of accomplishing these goals are all attributes that you want to pay attention to as you're looking at ending the group. Again, workers' pride in their own therapeutic skills, sadness or loss are not untypical experiences, re-experiencing their own losses, relief and doubt and guilt about the therapeutic effectiveness and sadness are all things that you will potentially see as you are preparing to end your group sessions with your clients. So again, wanting to make sure that there is a clearer understanding of those particular dynamics as you are preparing for the end of your group work. And believe it or not, the 5 to 7 group series that you'll have will happen very quickly, and so it's about making sure that you're thinking about and being mindful of the need to look at how the group ends work. As always, we'd encourage you to continue to read your assignments and come to class prepared to discuss any questions that you may have regarding this particular process. Good luck, and I will see you in class soon.